So I've always been an avid reader since I was young, from comics to manga to manhwa, and the list goes on. But one day while scrolling on TikTok, I stumbled across a bunch of recommended fantasy web novels, like Lord of the Mystery, Spare Me Great Lord, and whatnot. Yet none caught my eye like this one. Now, even though I had it in my reading list, I hadn't started it yet, and with some manga like Black Clover being on hiatus and Jujutsu Kaisen being on break, I figured now would be the best time to get into it. I read 300 chapters. 300 chapters in one day. I don't think y'all understand when I say I was properly invested. Then 1500 chapters later, I was certain I found peak for this genre. This was a fantasy novel that gave off manga vibes with crazy amounts of lore to be explored, with slight romance later, and it all just blends so damn well. So now I'm going to talk about Shadow Slave, if you haven't already guessed it. So let's start with a little bit of the world's history. They had 12 billion people to start before the Dark Times began. Then a few decades later, after their Earth is finally recovering from multiple natural disasters, with the most prominent being Antarctica melting and rising the sea levels displacing billions of civilians, the destruction of global infrastructure, and resource scarcity, which then led to an unreasonable amount of wars and all types of warfare being used in order to win. Then, after all of that and them finally being somewhat stabilized, they are then hit by the beginning of the nightmare spell. Now, while all the creatures were of dormant rank, the lowest rank, in which I will explain the ranks later, that was enough to overwhelm humanity's military until the first of the awakened, the people who lived through the first trial of the spell, returned and slayed said monsters, ushering in a new peace and world order, maintained by the government and the legacy clans that were founded. Now, onto the current time, we see society seemingly okay once again, with people living just life as normal. Well, as normal as living in pretty much a dungeon hunter manhwa, with the scary factor being turned up to 11 can get. With North America, South America, and Europe now being inhabitable, our story starts in the outskirts, or I guess the slums of Asia, surprisingly enough. But we'll get back to that later. Before I go further into the novel, I have to explain the power system used, which begins with the energy called soul essence, then where it's stored, the soul core, and the paths of ascension and corruption that each species takes. Now each path has 7 ranks, and only the path of corruption contains classes for each rank. Humans normally follow the path of ascension, which they rise up towards divinity. The paths go dormant, who are called sleepers, awakened, who are called just awakened, ascended, who are masters, transcendent, who are saints, supreme, then sacred, and finally divine. This is not to say that humans can't be corrupted and as such fall and descend into profanity. Talking about profanity, that's the path for nightmare creatures. The ranks also start at dormant and then awaken, but soon after they descend, with the next being fallen, corrupted, great, cursed, and lastly unholy. Next up are the classes. We have beasts with 1 core, monsters with 2, demons with 3, devils with 4, tyrants at 5, terrors at 6, and finally titans at an astounding 7. With that said, let's actually talk about the soul cores. The soul core is where the essence is found, and moving up a rank increases the quality of your essence, as opposed to moving up a class, which increases the quantity due to the creation of another core. But it is to be noted that going down the path of corruption is not the only way to get more soul cores. Another fact to realize is that when nightmare creatures gain a new core, it is not only an increase in soul essence amount, but they also gain other perks like abilities and manipulation of lower / lesser minions, but a constant factor is that the elevation of intelligence and strength. More cores means the stronger and smarter the creature will get. For example, a corrupted beast will lose to an awakened titan 9 out of 10 times, if not for the slight chance of the impossible. Not to forget that humans also gain more abilities by going up the ranks, like masters being able to control soul essence and the saint's transformation ability. Next, we'll move on to the nightmare spell, the actual system of the Shadow Slave world, how it works, and its 2 mandatory nightmares. The spell aims and infects young people around the age of 16 to 18, and hits them with an overwhelming feeling of sleepiness, and after they succumb to the sleep, it transfers them to their first nightmare, specifically made for the person, but it should be told that dying in your first nightmare turns your dead body into a nightmare creature. That aside, the spell shows your given name, your true name which you have to earn, your rank, soul core, memories which are items given by the spell, may it be from a kill or something else, echoes who are summons of dead you've just killed, attributes which might as well just be a fancy name for affinities, your aspect name, and finally your aspect ability, which is your superpower. Now, it doesn't matter how you complete the nightmare, as long as you complete it, as the result is always the same. A boost to your rank, maybe you get a true name, and in extremely rare cases an evolution for your aspect. Not to forget that after your first nightmare you're given a flaw, and the flaw is usually something that is the complete and extreme opposite of who you are, like Cassia's flaw, which turned her blind even though she's an oracle. Then you have your second kind of nightmare, that sends you somewhere in the dream realm on the next winter solstice, a different world where monsters are a commodity, and you have to find and go through a gateway to finish the nightmare and become awakened. With all that said, we get to finally move on to our main character, and debatably my favorite character, Sunless, nicknamed Sunny, who has been infected by the insidious nightmare spell. He was a kid who was born on an eclipse and raised in the slums. He grew up alone in the shadows and lied to survive, until he gets infected by the spell. Thinking he's destined to die, he doesn't really care. But when he enters the nightmare, he finds his will to live, not for some lofty goal, but just to spite those who thought he'd die, and live a comfortable life too. Now, no, I did not just read the synopsis to you guys. This is just how I would describe the start of the story, Sunny. He's closed off, cautious, resourceful, and furthermore treacherous. But his character growth is done phenomenally, and I can't wait for what comes next, especially with Nephis. Nephis? I can't say her name properly. But yeah, this is actually the perfect time to talk about Nephis, or how you say her name. Nephis is more or less the deuteragonist of Shadowslave, the last heir of the immortal Flame Clan, and the eventual love interest. But romance isn't even really a theme until like the third nightmare in my eyes. Putting that aside, she has to be my second favorite character, with Sunny obviously being the first. She's just so well written from her strengths, personalities, and mannerism. This isn't even putting into perspective how her aspect and flaw interact, and just how quiet yet ambitious she is at the start. She's never given any of her skill due to her heritage. She works hard and shines through with blinding intensity. Okay, with all of the basic stuff aside, we're moving into heavy spoiler territory. So if you want to read the web novel yourself, just click off this video, finish the novel, and come right back. I'll be going deep into the lore here, but at the end of the day, I would still like you guys to go check it out yourself. So with all that said, let's talk about the myth of creation. In Shadowslave, we're told about a few creation stories with the 6 gods and 7 daemons, the origin of Earth, and the mystery of why there are 6 and not 7 gods, as the number 7 holds importance in this world. But the most recent story told us it wasn't always like that. Once again, if you want to click off this video, that's okay. Reading the lore drops and putting it together yourself was one of my favorite parts of the book. But anyways, in the very beginning, there was chaos and the void. It was always changing and everlasting, with creatures that were incomprehensible. Then came desire, and there is no desire without direction. The 7 gods were born of desire, unchanging, and were in constant conflict with the monsters of the void, who were forever changing. The order and disorderly, if you would. They fought for a long time, but in the end, the gods took direction, order, and formed it into a net, and then used their weapons to wrap around the void. Sadly, one of the gods couldn't retreat from the void in time, and just before the net could envelop, he tore off 7 parts of himself, or itself, that managed to escape the void. As the net closes, we see the creation of Earth, humans, and the 7 daemons who didn't know how they came to be. The 7th god, trapped in the void by the creation of the universe, wasn't trapped by the waking world or the dream realm, but more so the laws of the universe, like time and space. Unfathomable amount of years later, Weaver, the demon of fate, and the firstborn of the forgotten god, finds out the truth of their birth, and that they were formed of the forgotten god, the dream god, who was trapped in the void. That's all I'll say for now. Until you've read the novel, you will understand how big of a lore drop that kind of was. But that is not to say that there isn't a tons more to uncover and look for. Go reach out a slave, and that's pretty much it. Stay cold, stay frosted. Peace.